Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue with our conference. Hopefully you had a pleasant lunch, and hopefully you also met new and interesting people. Right now on the stage, you see a panel of panelists where we see people from the private sector, and they are about to discuss together with you and try to answer some future questions about the future. Is the future already here in Estonian businesses? Next to me, it's Põldvee-Mürk, who is the HR business partner from AS Protex, then Kristjan Vanaselja, CEO of GoWorkaBit, Margus Muld, CEO of Trigon Dairy Farming Estonia, and Kütt, HR manager from Coca-Cola Baltics. But let's start one by one here. Is the future already here in Estonian businesses? That is the topic of the day that was introduced by this video. Was there something you recognized as important in the video? Has the package been delivered, so to speak? Are the talents here? Is there something that's lacking? And anybody can answer this question, but we can also go one by one. As the representative of Protex, I can say that as a classical manufacturing production company, we sense that there is a lot of room for development. Today, the major share of our workers are tailors, sewers, and this is a job that you have to do in a fixed position from day in, day out, just repetitive movements. And the more we see integrated product development, the more we need additional competencies. For example, in our tent line, the sewers are no longer cutting the material. We have one person who sews the whole tent from zero according to manuals and drawings, and now that means they have to know how to learn how to read these guidelines, these drawings, the designs. And in addition, all these machines also need new technological capabilities. Of course, the future is here. I really like what William Gibbs said. He said that the future is here, only it has been spread about unevenly. In Coca-Cola HBC, which employs about 400 people in the Baltic states, from the storage workers to analytics, I see the future of work in our working environment. That means the computer screen, whether it's in storage facilities or in analytics. And I wholeheartedly agree with what Robert Kütt said. He said that the most important skill is the skill of learning. In the CV, we are no longer looking for whether they know English language. We look for something in addition to English, a third language, because that indicates that the person can learn more languages and is capable of learning. My name is Margus Muld, and I am active in agriculture. My main job is working the fields, and we have 176 people who are active in the dairy business. In our agriculture, in our businesses, we have used innovation to some degree, but I wholeheartedly hope that this is only the beginning, because in our sector, it is possible to do a lot more than we are doing right now in the sense of the future, in the sense of innovation. So when it comes to the whole concept, I think agriculture is a field right now that is fully developing. So whether it will develop to be organic agriculture or sustainable agriculture in the future, what kind of fields we can use, whether there will be people in tractors or not, the milking process, how that will work. 6,000 animals go through the milking process right now, and we can handle that with 6 people. 7, 8 years ago, we would have needed about 40, 50 people to milk all the cows. So the future is here, but we still have a long way to go before we get to where we would like to be one day. So technology and the whole mindset could and should develop faster than it has so far. So the main problem for us is that things are not coming as fast as we would like them to come. I do agree that the future in Estonian businesses has been here for a long time. At GoWorkaBit, through our clients, we have contacts with a lot of different professions. But if we look at our own company, then what is important for us is the different forms of work. In GoWorkaBit, in 5 years, we have never had an office. Everybody works where they want. As Maria said, computer is where your work is, your workplace. So we don't keep track of days off. People take days off when they need them. But what's most important is we try to create an environment for people where they want to learn all the time, where they want to develop all the time. And we encourage people to make mistakes, because mistakes are very good for teaching. So definitely the future is already here. If we look at the technology side, then do we even know what the future is? Because everything that we have today already seems like sci-fi, but what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after, it might be something that we can't even imagine today. How you described GoWorkaBit, it sounds like a very attractive startup or a modern digital company. People taking days off when they want. Everything is so flexible. It's fantastic. But what is it supported by, or what is it based on? Is it trust, or is it a sense of team? And if these are kind of soft or unclear things to the public or to the private sector, or public sector, the team culture, how do you achieve that? How do you develop that? I think here I would like to say more specifically something that I do not agree with at all is that this freedom and this freedom of choice, choosing your workplace, work time, this is attributed to startups a lot. So people think that only IT people can take their laptops and work where they want. So that's exactly what GoWorkaBit is aiming at, to offer that opportunity to anyone. We have client service representatives who, through GoWorkaBit, go work whenever they want. We have storage room workers where they also choose whoever they want to work for, when they want to work for them. And these jobs that GoWorkaBit recruits for, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Within GoWorkaBit, the company, I think one of the benefits is for us that we are a small team. It's a rather small company. But the basis, it's definitely trust. So we have to have trust in all our team members, wherever they are working. And on the other hand, communication is important. We have technologically built up systems so that people wouldn't feel alone. We have a developer in Saaremaa on the island working in the capital of Kuressaare there. We don't want him to feel alone and we're just writing this code and that's it. We want him to be a part of the team. So this person on the island understands his part of the whole and is working for a common goal. Exactly. So through the technological systems that we have, starting with video conferences, ending with chats, we want him to feel like he's sitting in the office with us, with everybody else. Kai, new talents, how are you managing to attract them? How are you offering them flexibility? and development opportunities. Is that something that's an important aspect for you? In production, yes, there are certain positions where we can arrange for that type of flexibility. First and foremost, through among the administrative staff, sales representatives, for example, others, other jobs. They don't have to definitely be there 9 to 5. They can work remotely. But if there is manufacturing, if there are some processes that have to be constantly maintained, then remote work is not possible. But I think we will come up with new solutions. So unfortunately, all our machinery is in 2 manufacturing units, one in Tallinn, one in Pärnu, and we can't tell the tailors that they can work remotely because we can't transport those machines home to them. In making one product, you might need 3, 4, 5 different machines before you get to the end result. So that's where we are today. What about Coca-Cola? Listening to Kai, I think that I suppose the sewing personnel is still cheap enough that you can offset the investment of the machines. Well, yeah, so when we talk about product development, then technology, of course, is getting better and better. So opportunities do arise over time. For example, we work more closely with other partners. So some operations do have to be subcontracted. So that's what the future is like. We have worked with ICT, with IT companies, with electronics companies, with research institutions, and we are definitely planning on continuing in that vein. We are putting a lot of focus on that area. Well, to answer the question about Coca-Cola HBC, of course, we want to be the best in the world in everything we do. In the Baltic states, we have a small water plant, but we have 2 people manning the lines, and that is just in case we don't necessarily need them there. Now let's turn the questions over to the audience. I do encourage you to use your smartphones, your devices. If you just joined us, you go to your web browser, you type in sli.do and the hashtag that you see up on the screen on the left side. And then you can ask questions. I would like to now ask one of these questions. How do you motivate people to break their habits, to learn how to learn? You can only change yourself. If there's anyone here that feels that their colleagues or themselves are smarter, then I think look at yourself first. What did you learn today? What did you read today? I think Mahatma Gandhi said it best when he said, be the change that you want to see in the world. And hopefully the change you make will be exponential. Would anybody like to add? One example, as I mentioned before, encourage people to try things. I completely agree that you can't force people to learn, force people to change. But through testing, through experimenting, even if they fail, and if you don't punish them. For example, in our organization, we recognize people for failing. And if they're unsuccessful at it, once every quarter, we choose a failure, and we recognize that person who has made the biggest failure. So that's just meant to for people to be brave enough to share their failures with others. So everybody tells us about their failures, and then the best one gets, or the worst one, depends on how you look at it, gets an award. Of course, if you are working on a line that costs a few million euros or dollars, then you have to really think about how you're going to experiment. But still, it's worth thinking about how to use that concept in your company. Because mostly we do see that all failures are penalized somehow. That is true. It's an interesting example you gave us about recognizing failures. In the education system, we have also projects that cost millions. It's public money. There's politics involved. How are you going to get somebody to admit their failures? In Finland, there was actually a campaign that was organized with a hashtag in a social media. I think it was a hashtag National Failure Day or something like that. So it was a startup scene in Helsinki who carried out this fun social media campaign encouraging everybody of all ages to fail and not take it too seriously. But let's look at the next question. Here we have questions directed at people. To Maria, what does it mean to recruit skills? Will some jobs disappear? Or will occupations disappear? I'm not sure how you would define occupation here. I think an occupation is a set of tasks. I think we are seeing less and less of these tasks in one agglomeration. Like Marju Lauristin said, we all have to approach the first grader individually as well. So this first grader is going to reach the workforce at some point, and if they're told that this is your job and there's 20 more people doing the same thing, it's not conceivable anymore. So jobs, occupations, I think they will disappear. Recruiting by skill, I think it was said half jokingly before that employers, businesses don't even know what skills they will need in 5 years, but it's not a joke. We don't really know. We do know, however, that at any moment we have to be ready to learn something completely new, and then you really feel that you're struggling, it's uncomfortable, but then you learn something. So when we recruit new people, what we look for in the CV is their general education, but we are also very much interested in additional information. What kind of courses, when, how recently, how varied are the courses that have been passed? And the more there are, the better it is. It's an indicator that the person is very much ready to learn something completely new. So it's like in an old Russian fairy tale that you go somewhere where you don't know and bring something you don't know what, but so the future is an unknown. But let's continue with the questions from our audience. Kai, will you remain a sewing company, or will you be developing more innovative products? And if so, how are you going to get there? Yes, well, Protex, I think something that distinguishes us from a classical sewing company is that we consider ourselves and our partners today as product developers. This is a topic that really speaks to us. Our slogan is "We solve it." So there are basically there's nothing that can't be developed as a product if we work together. In our company, we have several good examples of how the development process in order for a product to go live has taken 6 years. Sometimes it has taken 1 year. Some we have developed for 2, 3 years, and they are still in development. And while today we have a very strong pillar in the classical textile, we have textile leaders and icons really in place, but we are paying more attention to smart textile lines. This is actually about social need as well, societal need. For already 6 years, for example, we are producing a health product, a smart suit, which is integrated with electrodes. And these electrical impulses are controlled through a monitor. And these are used for patients with different kinds of muscle tension, and it helps relax that muscle tension. These are people who have had postnatal trauma or who have become paraplegic, and then they have muscle tension. And I think if in the future we make more of these kinds of products that we can use to help people, then that's a very noble mission for us. Smart textiles. That's very interesting. Let's go on with some other questions. And in the first half of the day, this microphone thing didn't really work for us, but maybe there is somebody who would like to take the microphone and ask from the audience. We'll give you an opportunity. If you do want to ask a question, raise your hand. I don't see any hands. So let's go to our app. Here's a question for a failure that is awarded. Can you give an example, please? For example, one of my own examples. I think it also characterizes a difference of cultures and how from a distance you can work in a team without meeting people on a daily basis, eye to eye. A year and a half ago in Lithuania, where we were testing whether our product would fly or not, we were forced to cease work. We had 3 people working there. We have been a very open company. We instantly talk about any problems we might have. So we got together the whole team. We had a video conference. We talked about the situation. And over the course of this video conference, we said that unfortunately we have to make changes in the organization without having spoken to the Lithuanian people earlier. We hadn't told them yet that we had to lay off these people. And of course it came as a shock to the Lithuanians and Estonians who had worked with us for longer. And there were 2 Estonians who we had to make redundant. And the Estonians said, okay, well, no problem, we understand. But with the Lithuanians, it was very tense. And of course, we immediately agreed also that we would meet one-to-one, we would go through the whole process and talk about why and so on. So the lesson was that even in a remote team, you also have to consider cultural differences, and you can't forget just the human side of things. Not everybody wants to communicate in the way you might prefer communicating. So for me as a manager, that was a big fail. I didn't get a bonus for it, but it was the biggest fail of that month. So it was a bad thing, but you talked about it openly within the business and you learned from it. Exactly. Well, first of all, we spoke one-to-one with all the Lithuanians. We apologized and we explained why we did what we did. But also later with the whole company, we also discussed it so everybody would have that information and would know about that lesson and maybe learn for the future. Margus, A businessman constantly has to be out of his comfort zone, so I will about to bring you out of your comfort zone now and ask you, how much is it possible to use robots in agriculture? In the future, are people not going to have to go to the barn anymore? I think in the future it is possible. Well, we do have unmanned tractors on fields. I think with tractors, the next 5 to 10 years are going to solve it. I think with the dairy herds, I think in the nearest 5 to 10 years, they can be automatically milked. What's more complicated is the veterinary issues, but I do think that in the future what we will see is dairy farms and work on the fields largely automated. My question for you all, by way of also introduction to other questions, is can you find people you need in Estonia to work for you? Already today, we are in a situation where in different companies we have a 10% workers from Ukraine, for example, from Latvia. But more than 10% of our workers are already Ukrainian. It's difficult to find employees in Estonia. If we talk about with other agriculture specialists and constructors, they say that we can't do without the foreign labor force, and especially in the low-skilled segment. So far, specialists and technology has been in the hands of Estonians. What about the rest of the panelists? Can you find workers you need in Estonia? So far, we have, but looking into the next years, we do have to look in a wider sense because we need international experience. We do have some people in our sites, also in Estonia, who have international experience, who have know-how about how to move on international markets. But it is likely that we will use somebody from outside Estonia. When we look at the clients who use GoWorkaBit and recruit flexible workforce in their everyday work, and among GoWorkaBit users, we have a lot of international students who work in addition to their studies with the help of our app. And I really don't see it as a negative when it comes to including a foreign workforce. I think it's the opposite. We need the skills, we need the know-how in Estonia. We need them to come to Estonia so that we could develop. Coca-Cola HBC supports inter-organizational or intra-organizational movement a lot. So all vacancies are on our intraweb, and anyone can apply for them. We also employ Ukrainians in financial department, for example. We have people from Russia, Armenia, Greece. Something that allows all that to happen is an English language work environment. Without that, we couldn't do that kind of international cooperation. But our mindset tends to be, if we have a vacancy, then there are too many people in the world rather than too few. So we're confident that we will find the right person for the job. When it comes to Protex, I can say that today we have managed with the local workforce. At the same time, we can't rule out looking across our borders. Having been part of the OSCA work group, in their final report, we also fixed the sad truth that by the year of 2025, the number of sewers in Estonia on the work market for that demographic and educational purposes will have decreased by 20%, which is quite a lot. But I don't think we see the future as just a purely sewing job or a sewing occupation. What we see is competencies have to change. They have to be more diverse, especially taking into account how new generations do not want routine. They want diverse and multifaceted work. We are trying to visualize the different operator, machine worker profiles who do different things on different days. Here, the technology background, IT background, interest in technology is very useful for us. So the sewers in our company, because they are actually forced to, they have no other choice. They are using welding machinery and so on, So they have to be diverse.
Kriimsilm toota või
So there's multifaceted workers, and in order to create those and find them, we do need a change. Now, we've heard today already how, for example, the private sector together with the public sector should dedicate themselves and also work towards these new kinds of multifaceted jobs. So how does this public-private partnership work into it, and what expectations do you have for the public sector, or what do you think should, for example, the private sector, what kind of role could you play in it? And the floor is yours. Well, taking into account that in this working group, we did have different people taking part in it. We had representatives from the ministries, from educational institutions, from different companies. So the conclusions we drew actually came to be in a collaboration. And the companies and their needs, for example, for them, we had proposals for different schools, so for vocational schools, for higher education, especially in which direction our educational landscape should change, and what the new curricula should be like for new innovative professions. I started thinking of this multifaceted being, and I kind of like to think of work as not just a job or some long-term commitment, but rather I like to think of it as if it's a task or some activity that's that needs to be done and solved as best as possible. And when I look at our own organization, then even now we employ a lot of short-term specialists, be they through some platforms or just on the market and seeking for them, and they come in and help us fill some specific task. And those that either work with us or just help us out, they develop their skills by doing different activities for different companies. And these may be from, let's say, one field of expertise, but it's definitely not just one service or work that they do. And through this experimentation, through this testing, trying it out, through doing all these different things, actually people's skills we mentioned before, they also develop. So when talking about the public sector, I think if the public sector has a very complicated task to forecast what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years. Entrepreneurs do have the chance to steer the ship in a different direction. Of course, it's more complicated for bigger companies, but yeah, I think the public sector does have the challenge and to kind of start thinking how this steering process can be quicker, how we could maybe avoid having to plan 15 or 20 years in advance. I think that the private sector and the employers could be a bigger part of what and how is taught in schools. Also, this qualification has a lot to do with what should be taught. And maybe it's worth looking into it, what is, for example, what's worth looking into more actual work practice, but when talking about this collaboration, where within the context of school, I already acquire some skills and knowledge and theoretical and practical vision into the actual working environment, could be very beneficial. I am a little bit hesitant because I do teach personnel management at the Tallinn University, and I quite often feel that these theoretical concepts can work for certain companies and they won't work at the other companies. So my point is to always talk about these general knowledge, and the students can look at the knowledge I spread to kind of make their own decisions, and hopefully they can find something that is very useful for them, or even things such as the Strategic Management Journal. Even though the contents changed, the title remains the same, and if these students from today actually remember that and they turn to these magazines, even that's already very beneficial. I did also study at the Tallinn University, and later on I studied in Belgium. So me and my friends had the same experience, that the way of teaching, not so much what was taught, but the way it was taught, was very different in these universities. For example, in Belgium, you had to learn so much more. You had to actually do things, and you had a lot of group tasks, which maybe it has changed now. Maybe it has changed now. I graduated in 2009 from a bachelor's degree in Tallinn, and we didn't really have any of these group tasks. But in Belgium, and also, for example, in Scandinavia, it's the approach is quite different. You need to work in groups, you need to plan together, you need to listen to each other, etc. So these group tasks and working with others, do you actually see it, or do we also have a need for this? These so-called soft skills. I think in the future it will hold an equally important role as it already has today, but it will even become even more because collaboration is the basis of everything. You can be a master at doing something on your own, but actually it is much more efficient, and you get better results if you have a synergy that can actually help create something even better, even grander. So working together is a very important skill, and without this, organizations will not cope. I mentioned something the virtual collaboration, but also maybe international collaboration. Maybe let's add this international element, or if you add this international element, maybe it mixes things up. Well, we do a lot of international collaboration, and a big part of the partners we work with at Protex is, have a Scandinavian background, and so English is a must. But even more and more we start feeling how these different Scandinavian languages would add more added value. So this daily communication via email or meetings, it's extremely important to be able to have this skill of international collaboration. I can testify to that. Knowing Swedish is very useful in Tallinn, in the western part of Estonia, and I personally always take the chance of encouraging people to learn Swedish. Everyone speaks English anyway, but when you start speaking with someone in their native tongue, then there's no other metaphor to bring than you have a common language. Well, one of our biggest customers is in Finland, and the ownership or the ownership group, one of these people one of the owners doesn't speak a word of English, and it's elementary for us to speak Finnish to them. International teams. So every one of us speaks English, and we do know that the companies are international and etc. But what does it look like in your companies? If your working language would be English, would it be a problem or not? Well, depends on what level within our company. Let's say tractor driver, they don't, milkman, they don't really need English, but specialists, starting with vets or farm managers, these are tasks that already incorporate this international cooperation. All this know-how that comes to Estonia generally comes here in English. So all these courses that are organized in the United States or in Germany, everywhere else, they're all in English as well. So of course, definitely, English knowledge is very much necessary, and thank God most of our people already have it. And Kristjan, in your case, I don't think it makes sense to even ask. Well, we have had times where the entire organizational language has been English, when we've had at least one foreigner in the group. There's been times where we can use Estonian, but the switch needs to happen extremely quickly. When we have a new person, they need to become a core member of the group. So in all communication channels, we need to switch to a language so that every single one understands everything. An interesting thing that was done in Helsinki, the Helsinki Trade Board did it, saying that everything needs to be English, but of course it always gets stuck behind something, and yeah. But Helsinki, together with some big companies, their municipal government, they started a competition with a big prize, a promotion, etc. And the competition was to bring an example from your company on how you or your company has become more international. For example, hired someone from abroad and speak English amongst each other. It was a very popular competition. I don't really remember who won it. They got the prize, but the Chamber of Commerce also gave some tips and pointers to the companies, and they had learned quite a bit of it, about it, and they had a big, nice gala event for it. So this that seems so natural to us actually was helped from the public sector. With such a small, little, simple thing as a competition. So for the participants, for the companies, they benefited from it greatly. So do we have any questions from the audience? Do we see any questions from the audience? Doesn't look like it. Let's take some questions directly from the internet. So, how big is the budget for trainings? And the budget that actually gets used as well. And what do we need to do it to double or triple this budget? We've heard about lifelong learning, upskilling, etc., etc. In our company, it's roughly 20,000 euros. Since our farms are so large, and this information and on how to keep going, etc. It's all tied with the United States, and we quite often need to either fly there or bring some specialist from the States here. But what happens quite often is that some people don't want to take part in these training programs, so we try to encourage them, and quite often the reason is either a relatively low level of English, so that they're afraid that they don't manage. But generally we've also overcome this thus far. So I think how to increase it, it should be possible. We have had training programs for pretty much every single level of in our company. So I think this 20,000 euros quite well spent. Well, part of the question is how much do we actually use? I think this question is a sign of the times. I mean, learning to a big degree is not such a well-defined thing anymore that you get into a classroom and then you have a training program and it lasts for 2 days. A lot of what is, let's say, training or learning in the Coca-Cola HBC is that you do project-based work in a different field. For example, I was working on a project that had to do with customer discounts. And a big part of my work had to do with working in an international group. We had a Greek person, we had a Czech person, a Ukrainian person, a Hungarian person, etc., etc., etc. And learning in this sense was the outcome of the project, but also this working together. And what was the actual cost of it? It was just the travel costs. So it didn't really have to do anything with the training budget. But what we can forecast is if we send our leadership, for example, to different universities, and this definitely has or fits into the budget. And our idea is that a yearly wage would be pretty much suitable for the budget. But quite often we also think of already at the beginning of the year what kind of projects could be relevant within the year and whether and how we could incorporate interns and work practice people from the universities into these programs. I am of the opinion that you can't really put a figure to this training on location. But with this method of training, you can actually give a lot of information and much more than you could during a seminar, for example, or in a classroom. So, for example, if we have a new device in our company, for example, we had a laser cutter coming recently. Then with this equipment, you have manuals, videos, you have, for example, a training program for the head technician from the producer of the company. But once it actually starts getting use, then this knowledge is based or given from one colleague to the next one on a need-to basis. And this, for us, is the most important training method. So we do agree that it is important to develop yourself, and I think this is a good note to end on. Thank you to the panelists.